This particular training is a training of trainers, which makes it sustainable in a way that you're trained to be able to train other people. So that sort of means you're not going to have information getting lost along the way, so that when you need to implement a similar project, they still have to look for you. There will be that person that you have trained and they'll be able to carry on the project. So it's a more form of capacity building.
With dedicated funds from Sweden through inclusive markets for energy efficiency in Uganda, Team Europe is paving way for transformative stories to unfold through its capacity building programs. One of these transformation stories is seen in Oyam district, where Team Europe financed a remarkable sustainable energy shift of Awelo millers.
We started from the diesel engine, but we started getting complaints from our clients that after grinding, the smell of the oil gets back to their flour. There was also low production because the diesel engine doesn't run very fast than the one for hydro. So that is why we shifted from the diesel to the hydro.
But this transformation is just one part of the story. Uganda's energy sustainability relies heavily on reliable hydropower.
We were able to get funds through the AFD digital facility. So we obtained funds from EU to facilitate this project. So as a way of meeting our mandate as UEGCL, there was a need to fill some gaps. There are some missing gaps, especially on optimizing hydropower. Because as you may be aware, we have 4 large hydropower plants in Uganda, and they are all located on River Nile.
The European Union and France work together to support Uganda Electricity Generation Company Limited's digitalization and improvement of its operations.
If we remember in 2020 and 2021, there's that period where we had high flows from Lake Victoria, then we had flooding around Lake Victoria shores and Lake Choga. So this was also part of the things that initiated this project.
Thus, Team Europe has allowed UEGCL to set an online tool, the Operation Decision Support System, which has the ability to predict the conditions of Lake Victoria and Lake Choga 9 months ahead for a better planning and use of the water resources for power generation.
So it takes into consideration the hydrology, that is rainfall, evaporation, and other hydrological parameters around Lake Victoria that affect flow. So then it forecasts the would-be lake level in the next 9 months.
This tool, however, is a work in progress, and its full potential will become even more evident as it continues to evolve and expand. As the journey continues, Team Europe remains steadfast in their commitment to building capacity and supporting Uganda's energy sustainability, ensuring a brighter and more sustainable future for all. In Uganda, the rising demand for energy services due to population growth, urbanization, and climate change presents challenges. The European Union and its member states are global leaders in the transition towards clean energy as a contribution to the fight against climate change. Promotion of renewable energy resources, energy efficiency and energy conservation measures, and research and innovation across sectors through awareness, access to finances, technical assistance, or capacity building of stakeholders are among the main channels used by Team Europe to deliver its support to Uganda.
The experience I've had with the participants, being that they're mostly from the Ministry of Energy and there are a lot of projects coming up, this training was timely to enable them do proper and better supervisions of the mini-grids that the ministry intends to install.
It's been very practical. I've gotten the understanding from basics, the fundamentals of electricity, AC, DC, why I should choose solar, how I should be using it, how I can
Morning, colleagues. Morning, everybody. So we'll be starting at exactly 9:15. Yeah, so I would like that we start to take ourselves in order, and then at 9:15, we will already kickstart this session. Thank you very much.
The European Union and its member states are global leaders in the transition towards clean energy as a contribution to the fight against climate change. Promotion of renewable energy resources, energy efficiency and energy conservation measures, and research and innovation across sectors through awareness, access to finances, technical assistance, or capacity building of stakeholders are among the main channels used by Team Europe to deliver its support to Uganda.
The experience I've had with the participants, being that they're mostly from the Ministry of Energy and there are a lot of projects coming up, this training was timely to enable them do proper and better supervisions of the mini grids that the ministry intends to install.
It's been very practical. I've gotten the understanding from basics, the fundamentals of electricity, AC, DC, why I should choose solar, how I should be using it, how I can install it.
This particular training is a training of trainers, which makes it sustainable in a way that you're trained to be able to train other people. So that sort of means you're not going to have information getting lost along the way, so that when they need to implement a similar project, they still have to look for you. There will be that person that you have trained and they'll be able to carry on the project. So it's more of a form of capacity building.
With dedicated funds from Sweden through inclusive markets for energy efficiency in Uganda, Team Europe is paving way for transformative stories to unfold through its capacity building programs. One of these transformation stories is seen in Oyam district, where Team Europe financed a remarkable sustainable energy shift of Awelo millers.
We started from the diesel engine, but we started getting complaints from our clients that after grinding, the smell of the oil gets back to their flour. There was also low production because the diesel engine doesn't run very fast than the one for hydro. So that is why we shifted from the diesel to the hydro.
But this transformation is just one part of the story. Uganda's energy sustainability relies heavily on reliable hydropower.
We were able to get funds through the AFD digital facility. So we obtained funds from EU to facilitate this project. So as a way of meeting our mandate as UEGCL, there was a need to fill some gaps. There are some missing gaps, especially on optimizing hydropower. Because as you may be aware, we have 4 large hydropower plants in Uganda, and they are all located on River Nile.
The European Union and France work together to support Uganda Electricity Generation Company Limited's digitalization and improvement of its operations.
If we remember in 2020 and 2021, there's that period where we had high flows from Lake Victoria, then we had flooding around Lake Victoria shores and Lake Choga. So this was also part of the things that initiated this project.
Thus, Team Europe has allowed UEGCL to set an online tool, the Operation Decision Support System, which has the ability to predict the conditions of Lake Victoria and Lake Choga 9 months ahead for a better planning and use of the water resources for power generation.
So it takes into consideration the hydrology, that is rainfall, evaporation, and other hydrological parameters around Lake Victoria that affect flow. So then it forecasts the would-be lake level in the next 9 months.
This tool, however, is a work in progress, and its full potential will become even more evident as it continues to evolve and expand. As the journey continues, Team Europe remains steadfast in their commitment to building capacity and supporting Uganda's energy sustainability, ensuring a brighter and more sustainable future for all. In Uganda, the rising demand for energy services due to population growth, urbanization, and climate change presents challenges. The European Union and its member states are global leaders in the transition towards clean energy as a contribution to the fight against climate change. Promotion of renewable energy resources, energy efficiency and energy conservation measures, and research and innovation across sectors through awareness, access to finances, technical assistance, or capacity building of stakeholders are among the main channels used by Team Europe to deliver its support to Uganda.
The experience I've had with the participants being that they're mostly from the Ministry of Energy and there are a lot of projects coming up. This training was timely to enable them do proper and better supervisions of the mini grids that the ministry intends to install.
It's been very practical. I've gotten the understanding from basics, the fundamentals of electricity, AC, DC, why I should choose solar, how I should be using it, how I can install it.
Hello, hello. Are we set? Can we have some attention, please? We want to start the session. It's already 15 minutes past 9 o'clock, and we promise to start on the dot. We're already behind schedule, so we are hoping that, yeah, we manage to catch up with the remaining time.
Good morning.
You ask them, Buindi.
Are the slides visible?
All right. I think we can already start. I hope our live stream link is ready now. We can already start the session. Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's session on Team Europe Global Gateway. Yeah. My name is Eve Marshall. I am the Communications Advisor for the Energy and Climate Cluster under GIZ. And I would like to welcome everybody here today. I'll run through quickly the day's agenda, and then after we'll already run through our day session. Yeah, so maybe just before we start, I would like to make some of you understand what Global Gateway really stands for. It stands for Sustainable and Trusted Connections that Work for People and the Planet. So we are basically working together as Team Europe, all the different Team Europe countries to, come together, and we do different programs that are all that fit into the Team Europe initiatives. Yeah, so we'll have started already by 8:30. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this. However, we'll already be adjusting today's session, and now, before we get into the opening remarks, we'll have after that, we'll have a session on enhancing the enabling environment for mini-grids development in Uganda, and that would have already been started already, but we'll start it later. Should run up to 11 o'clock, and then we'll have different key panelists here to take us through. And then at about 11 o'clock till lunchtime, we'll have a session also on unlocking private sector investments in small and medium scale renewable energy. And here we'll be looking at lessons learned from the Get Fit project. And then later on, we'll have a few presentations from the different sorry. Yeah, so we'll have a presentation from KFW and ERA, and then we'll also have one of the last sessions after lunch. It's a session on Meet the Entrepreneurs, and yeah, so it will be run by the Get Invest team. And that will be basically today's session. And would like to take as much time as possible to interact and, take stock of what we've been doing the past year, and then see how we can also make the next years better. Yeah. And yeah, without much further ado, I'd like to invite Miss Caroline Hedstrom to give us some opening remarks. She's the head of cooperation at the European Union delegation. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Eve. Good morning, everyone. Distinguished guests, esteemed representatives of various government departments, my Team Europe colleagues, and fellow development partners and private sector representatives that are engaged in Uganda's energy sector. So as Eve said, my name is Carolina Hedström. I'm the head of cooperation at the European Union delegation to Uganda. And I'm very excited to be part of today's conference that brings together experts from various fields to share knowledge and experience on how to create a more conducive environment for a just energy transition in Uganda. I'm particularly proud to welcome you to this full-day Team Europe side event, where we will spend the day discussing Team Europe's role in supporting Uganda's ambitious targets of universal access to electricity by 2030. So Team Europe brings together the European Union and its member states, as well as European financial institutions and implementing partners. As Team Europe, we have been working closely with the government of Uganda, the private sector, and other development partners to support Uganda's efforts to universal access to energy and towards a low-carbon, resilient, and sustainable energy system. Today's Team Europe side event will display our commitment to a collaborative approach in meeting Uganda's energy targets. As Team Europe, we believe that by working together, we can achieve more and make greater impact. This is why we have today brought together experts from the European Union, Uganda, and beyond to share their insights on how to tackle the complex challenges that lie ahead. I hope you have seen our new brochure, which is available on the table out there, Energizing Uganda's Greener Future. This brochure highlights our support as Team Europe for the energy sector in Uganda, which focuses on 4 critical cluster areas. The first one is access to energy, then renewable energy, regional market integration, and clean cooking. These areas are interconnected and interdependent, and by addressing them in a collaborative and coordinated manner, we believe we can make a greater impact and achieve more sustainable results. So to start with the area of access to energy, Team Europe works towards increasing access to electricity for millions of Ugandans. Our efforts are focused on promoting on-grid and off-grid solutions, including mini-grids and standalone systems, to reach remote and underserved communities. And we will hear more about this in the session coming soon. Here we have a clear division of labor in place, with different Team Europe members taking the lead on specific areas. For example, we have France driving work in grid expansion, while the EU provides vital grants for cross-border connections. Germany and the EU are pioneering the development of the mini-grid market and working to bring it to scale. And Sweden and Denmark are championing the development of standalone systems. In the area of renewable energy, we're working with our Ugandan counterparts to support the development of renewable energy sources, diversifying the energy mix, and driving down the cost of electricity generation below the $5 per kilowatt hour, which is a challenging target set by Uganda in its 3rd National Development Plan. On that note, I'm very pleased to announce that yesterday, day before yesterday actually, the European Union adopted the financing decision to secure 30 million euros in essential grant funding for a major new flagship project under our Global Gateway strategy. This is part of a 170 million euro Team Europe package, which combines the 30 million grant from the European Union with the 75 million euros from France, the French Development Agency, and 65 million euros from the European Investment Bank. Together, we hope that this financial package will enable the critical rehabilitation of the Nalubale-Kira hydropower system, a rehabilitation which will hopefully prevent potential future failures that could cripple the economy and drive up electricity tariffs. In the area of regional energy market integration, we're providing substantial support to back Uganda's vision to become a major power hub in the region by 2040. This is notably by supporting the development of cross-border electricity interconnectors to help increase energy security, reduce the cost of energy, and improve good neighborly relations. So on that note, I'm also pleased to let you know that the European Union and France, through the AFD, the French Development Agency, will join forces to support the Tanzania-Uganda interconnector. And we're hoping that the European Union decision on a 45 million euro grant funding that will meet the concessionality requirements of an AFD loan will be decided in November this year, so very soon. Finally, in the area of clean cooking, we are working to support the sustainable management of Uganda's forests by reducing the use of traditional biomass fuels for cooking. Again, we have a clear division of labor in place, with different Team Europe members taking the lead on specific areas. The European Union and Uganda have an ongoing forest partnership, which is a cornerstone of our overall partnership with Uganda. This is a political agreement to protect and preserve Uganda's forests that's backed up by 40 million euros worth of projects supporting the forestry sector. Other member states, such as Italy and Denmark, are also active in forest management and reforestation. The Netherlands, together with Denmark and the European Union, are supporting the clean cooking sector. So this is also something we will hear more about. So as you can see, in all these sectors, we work together as Team Europe and with Ugandan counterparts, both government and private sector. And we believe that this targeted collaboration, which is very much aligned with Uganda's priorities, enables Team Europe to amplify our impact and deliver more value. So we're looking forward to exchanging more on this today. Now the music is starting, so I will wrap up. That's a good sign, and I wish you all the best, and I hope that we will see some new collaborations coming out of this event as well. So thank you all so much for coming and for sharing all your ideas for future collaborations today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina. And now, without wasting so much time, we want to dive into the next session. The next session is, we're going to talk mini grids, everything mini grids. We have over 45 mini grids that have been installed countrywide. And there's been so many great stories around the installation of mini grids in the different locations across the country. And I don't want to take the show. I would like to invite Miss Olga Namatovu. She's an energy advisor at the Energy and Climate Cluster with GIZ. She's done most of the work around mini grids, so I would like that she takes this on from me. You're welcome, Olga. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. You're welcome to the Team Europe session, and I'm actually pleased to be the one starting us off this morning. Thank you for taking the time and also being here on time. We apologize for the late start, but yeah, let's get this interesting session started. Yeah, so I think for those of us who were at the Power Forum yesterday, we got a look and feel about where exactly Uganda is in terms of energy access. And this is why we are here. Yesterday, the discussion at the Power Forum focused a lot on grid, and we were able to also get the most recent numbers on energy access just to set the scene a bit. On grid is 22%, off grid is 38%. Now, the discussion in the room here is going to focus on the 38%, the off grid. What are the different EU member states doing to really support Uganda in accelerating and achieving its targets around energy access in general? Yeah, we will start off with mini grids. This panel that I'm going to moderate will discuss the enabling environment for deploying or developing mini grids in Uganda. How can we advance that and deploy mini grids as fast as possible? It's also very clear now that off-grid does contribute a lot to the energy access targets. Looking at on-grid being at 22% and off-grid 38%. You can imagine if all of us in the room are working on off-grid, how fast we would accelerate access. Basically only focusing on off-grid solutions. I think later on we'll also have a chance to discuss private sector investment. How do we unlock that? I think most of us who are familiar with the National Electrification Strategy of Uganda, the government does indeed intend to rely a lot on private sector when it comes to deploying off-grid electrification solutions and really contributing to these access targets. So that discussion with KfW GetFit will really also shape and put more perspective to issues. And then lastly, we will also hear directly from the private sector themselves with Get Invest. Yeah, meet the entrepreneur sessions in the afternoon. Please don't miss out because it's all interlinked. Let's start with a sort of set the scene presentation, because This panel is mainly going to focus on the policy aspects. Exactly. What can we do as regulators who are present in the room, as private sector, as donors, as development partners in general? What can we do to create an enabling environment, looking at specifically the policy and regulatory framework to really enhance off-grid development in the country? I would like to start us off with a short presentation from one of our colleagues from GIZ, Bomika. I don't know if we are ready to start. Yeah, in a few seconds. It will be an online presentation. Please focus on the screen. But it will basically get us started in terms of really understanding what are the regulatory challenges in this market. Why are we at 38%? Yeah, yet we are targeting to be at 100% universal energy access by 2025. Yes. Let's get started with Bomika. Thank you so much. You could start by introducing yourself, Bomika, and then take us away. Thanks.
I hope I'm well audible to everybody there. Thank you very much for that introduction, and very happy to be making this presentation to everyone there, even though it is remotely. And also a big thank you to the organizing team for making it possible that I could join remotely. Very quickly, my name is Bhumika Tiwari. I am a technical advisor for regulation and market development at Get Transform. And as Olga mentioned, there's going to be this very interesting session talking about mini grids, how to really scale mini grids in Uganda. And what I would like to do in this presentation is to zoom out a little bit and talk about mini grids a bit more generally, and about what we can do to create a more enabling environment for mini grids in general in Africa, and then of course more specifically in Uganda. Before we get started, I just want to take a couple of minutes to introduce you also to Get Transform. This is a technical assistance facility, also part of the Team Europe environment. We are co-financed by a number of donors, as you can also maybe see on my screen here, European donors. And we basically do a lot of implementation support and capacity building together with the public sector, be it in terms of regulators, be it in terms of utilities or energy ministries, and support them in the transformation of their energy sectors. We are present in Latin America, Central America, as well as Africa. And we work primarily through country window modalities and have 5 country windows in Africa. Uganda is one of them. So are Mozambique, Lesotho, Namibia, and Eswatini. And then beyond that, we also work at a regional level. For instance, in Sub-Saharan Africa, together with organizations like AFUR, that is the African Forum of Utility Regulators, or AUC, or AUDA, NEPAD, and so on and so forth, to really scale the best practices and learnings that we have from our countries and from our expertise at a more regional level and harmonize them. The way we are set up, we are working through 4 work streams, as we like to call them. These are long-term energy planning, where the focus is more on integrated energy power system investment plans and really modeling long-term energy scenarios for different countries. The second is renewable energy grid integration, which is more focusing on the technicalities of introducing more and more renewables into the power systems. Then there is on-grid regulation and market development, where we deal with institutional reforms, with market designs, also with auction frameworks, and so on and so forth. And lastly, off-grid regulation and market development, where we focus on mini-grid primarily, in terms of regulatory frameworks, in terms of data management frameworks, as well as procurement frameworks. To give you a very short example, we have been very active in Mozambique, in Uganda, in Lesotho, and as well as Africa regional in terms of mini-grid regulations and procurement frameworks. For instance, in Mozambique, we have been part of the organizations that have supported the development of mini-grid regulations, including sub-regulations like grid arrival regulation, as well as tariff regulation and the tariff tool. In addition to that, in Uganda, for instance, we have only last year concluded technical standards and performance standards for mini-grids. And in Lesotho, and actually also concluded this year a 2-week training on mini-grids, including everything from business modeling, from financial modeling to technical aspects of mini-grid, regulatory aspects, how to do procurements, best practices from across the continent, and what are the next steps for Uganda as well. And the same we have done in Lesotho. And in addition to that, are also now reviewing together with the regulator there, the mini-grid regulations, so that we can really also advance the regulatory environment and invite more investments into the country. Based on all these experiences, recently we have also finalized the African Model Mini-Grid Regulation Tool, which we have been closely working on together with the African Forum for Utility Regulators. Uganda was one of the countries that also participated in the initial phases in a workshop for refining this tool further. And what's really interesting about the tool is that it allows for regulatory documents, for regulations and regulatory documents to be developed for 8 different business and ownership scenarios. And if you have an interest, then you can always approach us to know more about this. But just to move on further, and before I dig deeper into the topic, I just want to take a moment to also reflect on why mini-grids are relevant at all. Why are so many of us here still talking about it and sitting in this room and going to be part of this panel discussion? And if you look at the most recent data, about 600 million African people still do not have access to electricity. And of these 600 million, something around 31 to 32% is to be electrified through mini-grids, which is 180 million people. And Uganda is, in fact, one of the 5 countries that account for about half of these people, of the 600 million people who need access to electricity in Africa. The others include DRC, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. And so more than in other countries, it is so important and crucial in these 5 countries to really scale up electrification rates and really scale up the work on off-grids and mini-grids specifically. Now to really look at how we do that, how can we scale mini-grids? How do we create a better environment for the development of more and more projects? Because we need hundreds and hundreds of mini-grids in the country, in the region. And at Get Transform, we have sort of classified or categorized these into building blocks or regulatory building blocks for mini-grids. And as you see here, we view the most important or the key ones that we have sorted out are the 8 that you see here on the screen now. Under planning, for instance, is integrated electrification planning, to really plan how the grid will be expanded, densified, where will be the off-grid sites, the mini-grid sites, and so on. And all of this really needs to be backed up by validated and updated data. In terms of regulatory frameworks, it is important to have simplified licensing procedures, to have long-term concessions. It is very important to have standardized tariff setting tools and principles in place. It is very, very important to have very clear grid arrival options, and then also to have technical and performance standards that speak more to mini-grids, rather than just applying utility scale technical and performance standards, which really do not account for the reality of mini grids. And then lastly, in terms of incentive mechanisms, to have clear auction and procurement guidelines in place, which can be plugged into by different funding windows, for instance. And then in addition to that, have fiscal incentives in terms of, for example, clear guidelines on customs, and also exemptions in terms of VAT and custom duty, for instance. And through all of this, what is cross-cutting and what really needs to be streamlined is the topic of productive use and gender responsive approaches. So this is not a block in itself, but really something that needs to be adapted to in every element and every building block that we speak to. And in addition to that, what is also extremely crucial is to have good governance structures in place and stakeholder engagement. So to really have clear governing roles and implementation guidelines in terms of all of these building blocks. And what is also something very important that we have seen from our experience in the countries that we have worked with, and of those that we on a regular basis engage with, is to have one champion organization, one national champion, national agency that really holds it all together, that all the other agencies, all the other donor organizations can plug to, which really drives the development in the country. And this is very, very important. I will not go into each and every building block here. Otherwise, we will be just sitting listening to this presentation for the next how many minutes. But I have picked out a few topics that I think may also be interesting and may actually come up more frequently in the panel discussion that will follow. The first is that of concession and licensing. It is important to have longer concessions for mini grids. Typically, we see something in the range of, and also licensing periods. So typically, what we are seeing is like 5 to 10 years. But really, what is needed is something ranging between 20 to 40 years even. This is because mini grids do have high capital costs, and there is a slow development of demand or load, as we call it, in rural areas, which means that it can take many years for projects to become profitable. And having longer concession periods or license periods would provide more certainty to developers and investors that their projects will be allowed to become profitable. We do see some instances now of longer concession periods, for instance, in Kenya and Benin, where they have applied 20 years associated to an average of 40% in subsidy of the total capex. And this is something that we are recommending more and more in the sector. On the right-hand side, you will also see a graph which depicts licensing and approval processing times for different countries in 2020. And while it is important to have simplified licensing procedures, as I mentioned already, it is even more important to really implement them and optimize the processing time. On an average in Africa, what we have seen is a processing time of 58 weeks. So that's basically 2 months. Nigeria, however, has really streamlined their processes and brought this time down to 31 weeks, so half of the average. And that should really be the goal here, to minimize processing time, to cut down on these transactional costs and allow for more and more projects to be onboarded. And to move now beyond single licensing to more portfolio applications and licensing, to also allow for more scale to happen in an easier manner. The next topic that I want to sort of bring to focus is that of enforcing cost-reflective tariffs. I'm not really saying cost-reflective tariffs, because I think this is a reality that most everybody in the room has now faced and accepted to some degree. But really going beyond the idea that we need cost-reflective tariffs is to actually now enforce them, to also allow appropriate return on investments and balance tariffs and subsidies. I will not speak too much about why we need cost-reflective tariffs. I think this will also be something that will come up in the conversation and also something that we've already talked a great deal about in the sector. But I want to push beyond and say that what are other best practices that can be adopted? For instance, is to embed also tariff setting principles and review rules in concession contracts. So not just in the mini grid regulation that may be in place, but also in the concession contracts. Which a national agency can be a signatory to along with the mini grid project developer, to then also allow guarantee agencies like World Bank's MEGA guarantee agency to come into the picture and guarantee the investment. And this is only possible when such a contract exists and these principles are captured in the contracts. Besides that, to also really adopt more flexible approaches in terms of tariff setting, including, for instance, time of use tariffs, and also incorporate new upcoming principles like that of price elasticity of electricity demand, as we have done in Mozambique, for instance, where in the development of the tariff model, which we supported, we adapted this principle. And the same with the AFUR tariff model, which we had reviewed and recommended the inclusion of this principle. And third and last, really going back to the basics in terms of electrification planning. What I missed out though here is on the right-hand side, you will see also some examples of the tariffs being charged in some different countries in Africa. In Sierra Leone, for instance, we are seeing rates ranging between $80 to $90 which are actually cost reflective. In Nigeria, the tariff model also allows for cost reflective tariffs to be generated, and these are in actuality around $80. But what we are seeing is that developers are charging due to community pressures or political issues more tariffs in the range of $40 to $50 per kilowatt hour. And then in Uganda, we have had a tariff ceiling of sorts of $30 per kilowatt hour, which I think is something interesting to mention here, and I think would also be something that may come up in discussion later today. And now, indeed, lastly, to speak again to electrification planning, because this is so important to not only integrate mini grids in electrification plans, and then also together with realistic and updated grid expansion plans. On the right-hand side, you will see a snapshot of the electrification planning platform that GIZ developed together with the Nigerian government, which allows, but firstly also, the way that this platform was developed, at the time of development, there was not a lot of good data available. And so really the team went on the ground to validate the data, to update it, and then use that data to create this platform to actually create something that speaks to the reality on the ground. And I'm not sure if it is very visible now on the screen, but you are then not only able to see the areas where mini grids may be developed or solar home systems or the grid and so on, but also be able to see the size of the community, the number of connections, the kind of socioeconomic conditions or data available, including productive use. And it is possible to see where there are existing mini grids too, the sizing of them, and where they may still be developed, together with the number of households to be connected, and indicatively the size of the mini grid that may be developed. What is important, or more important than not, it's important, of course, to have the plan, but even more so important is to transparently make it available, and to also establish linkages with tendering windows that may periodically take place in the country. Sometimes these two are out of sync, and it is so important to sort of have them go hand in hand. I also mentioned grid arrival here because this is to a degree also linked to electrification planning, because although sometimes we do see these cases where, despite there being a plan in place, suddenly there would be the grid arriving at a mini grid site, which was not planned earlier. And so it is important to have these clear guidelines and options in terms of what happens in such a scenario, and to lay out the compensation mechanisms down to the T so that there is no question what happens at that point or at that juncture. And this is, again, a certainty that we provide to mini grid developers and to investors. Moving on, and this is really the last slide and the last few words that I want to share with you, at least today and in this context, is that we've talked about the building blocks, we've talked about some of the 2 or 3 elements that we thought could be interesting for the audience today. And it's very, very important to really push the envelope further and refine more the regulatory framework. But I do want to say that we have made a lot of progress. In the last few years, if you see on the graph, the yellow depicts the growth or the progress for mini grid frameworks in sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see between 2017 and between 2021, there has been so much progress made. All these building blocks that I have talked about, to some degree, they exist in so many countries now. What really needs to happen now is to really tweak them further, to enhance them further, and implement them, to really operationalize them, to commit to them, to really allow for scale to happen. And then on this note, I will stop. Thank you very much for listening in. I cannot see the audience right now, but I'm very happy to have been part of the session. And I will just hand over now to Olga. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bhumika, if you can hear us. Thank you for setting the scene and getting us started. So in the interest of time, I'll just directly then invite our panelists. Please, you can already take your seats and we shall do the introductions. So we shall have representations from representation from the Ministry of Energy. Please take your seat. We shall also have representation on this discussion from the regulator era. Please take your seat, whoever is representing. We shall also have a representation from GIZ. Please take your seats. And the private sector as well. Please take your seats, NUT. We shall also have representation from one of the key EU member states working on mini grids as well, BGFA. Please take your seats. All right, we are ready to get started. You can see that the panel is quite representative. We have the regulator represented, we have the government represented as well, private sector, but also key development partners that are also being at the helm of this journey when it comes to off-grid energy access in Uganda. Before getting us started, I just wanted to complete a bit the mini grid electrification picture based on the NES. So currently, the current NES foresees development of over 2,500 mini grids by the end of 2030. Yeah, which is like 5 years from now. If you do some quick math, that would mean that roughly the government needs to deploy at least over 300 mini grids per year. Yeah. What is the current situation right now as we speak? I think we have about 48 mini grids that are currently operational, that have been deployed. And we also have a couple of pipeline projects that are coming up that we hope will also increase the numbers for mini grids. Sorry. Yeah, that we hope will also increase the numbers of the mini grids. And what we are also seeing commonly is that these mini grids have been primarily funded through grants, mostly development partners like the EU that has been really at the helm of financing these mini grids and including other EU member states. We have also seen Sorry about that. We have also seen non-commercial private capital playing a key role, private sector investment as well coming in, but at a very, very small scale. Yeah. But you can imagine 48 mini-grids at the moment, vis-a-vis the targets the country has set. We have to do something. That means there is a bit of slow progress happening. What can we do as the government, as development partners, to really increase, hasten the deployment of these mini-grids? The strategy is very clear, very good propositions have been put in place, but how do we then get these targets to be a reality for Uganda? Yeah, and that's where I'll start from, and I'll start with the ministry. Yeah, Engineer Elizabeth, you will have an opportunity. You'll start by introducing yourself, but you, right now, the gap within the NES is very clear. When you look at the mini-grid objectives set by government for the National Electrification Strategy and the current reality that we have spoken about is very, very clear, yeah. And the government now, following the merging of the Rural Electrification Agency now into the ministry, your role is now clear. Your mandate is now to steer the rural electrification process. Do you think, when you look at the current NES, that government is able to meet the short and long-term mini-grid objectives of business? What are some of the challenges and opportunities you think we could look at, and how can government really prioritize mini-grids in general? Please introduce yourself, and you have 10 minutes. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Kejuka Okwenje. I'm a Principal Energy Officer in the Renewable Energy Department at the Ministry of Energy. Now, yes, you referenced the NES. The National Electrification Strategy is it's ambitious, where even the energy policy, we're looking for universal access by 2030. As you mentioned, the reality of the ground, Olga, we've been working together since implementing these mini grids. You know the reality that we face. So from the strategy, we're trying to carve out a plan, a master plan, from which we can get the realistic numbers. So as we stand, we have available like approximately 500 sites, which are realistic to be implemented. Available as of today. But in any case, the energy policy of 2023 clearly identifies the key issues in mini-grids. You asked about the challenges. There are 5 that I'm going to focus on, which are from the energy policy. You can have access to it online. First of all, it talks about the inadequate regulatory framework. We've been working through the promotion of mini-grids project. We have developed certain instruments and mechanisms that includes, bundled tenders and a concession framework so that we can provide a subsidy to developers and just promote private sector investment with government support. So we're working on that together with the regulator. We have the isolated grid regulations. And yeah, those are some of the strategies we're doing. So another challenge from the energy policy is the lack of anchor loads in areas that are suitable for mini-grids to make them financially viable. As you know, without anchor loads or without productive use of energy and income generating activities, it's quite hard for even the developers to get revenues. There's also a challenge. Actually, I'll put it on both sides, not just the anchor loads, but even the developers to get more innovative and look at different revenue streams, not just from electricity sales, but to try and make it a more viable business model. Then we have, there's preference for grid connection over mini grids. The communities, rural populations often prefer grid connection to mini grids. Maybe it's just a perception, also because, of course, of the higher tariffs. And yeah, then there's operation and maintenance challenges. These developers sometimes lack the financial capacity to maintain the mini grids effectively. So they also require support, additional support on top of the subsidy on the capex. So we're finding those challenges. Then we have the issue of the license. I think Bhumika mentioned it, the license duration. So they prefer longer license periods for their longer to pay back their investment. But our challenge is we have to look at the rural population. We can't subject them for 20 years to a higher tariff. So we have that balance as government that we have to address. So what are the opportunities? Like I said, we have a framework in place, a concession framework, which has been over the years through the lessons learned from the promotion of mini-grids, where we developed installed 25 mini-grids in Lamwo, northern Uganda. We now have instruments like the subsidy agreements, the lease agreements for the land. We have and the distribution network. We have the implementation agreements with government. We have the license exemption. So we have a framework in place, and we're using the lessons learned to scale up. We have a Get Access project that's coming up, which is funded by KfW, where we plan to roll out 150 mini-grids. So we have this bundled tender mechanism where we have clusters, and we tender out the mini-grid, the cluster, to a developer to receive a subsidy. So those are competitively tendered out. So we hope we've gotten so far, we're just evaluating we've had the pre-qualification so far for the tender. So we're really looking forward to even opening up the market to bring in more competition, between the developers, so that we don't have a monopoly as well. So those are the challenges. I think I've talked a lot. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Indeed, you did highlight a couple of challenges that directly link to private sector and the regulator. And it's a good thing we have full representation here. So I'll then just move to the regulator. Yeah. Some of the challenges highlighted again in the energy policy, building onto what Engineer Elizabeth just presented, including the uncertainty of the regulatory tariff regime, where developers are not able to really charge cost-reflective tariffs. And governments, again, in their presentation, they hope to rely a lot on private sector to invest and scale mini-grids, particularly for off-grid energy access. The issue of concessions has also been touched on, relatively short mini-grid concessions for mainly, I think, mainland mini-grids. The issue of the tariff cap has also been hinted on, where government, on the other hand, is very concerned about exposing their customers to high mini-grid tariffs for longer concessions, yeah? And then you have a private sector that also expects a return on investment. Given these fast-moving mini-grid market developments, yeah, the market seems to grow every day, and hence you would also expect that regulations would also revolve according to where the market is moving. How do you plan to deal with these challenges at the same time really having private sector in the lead and driving the market? Because that seems to be government's sole strategy at the moment to scale this market. Thank you. Please introduce yourself first. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Olga. My name is Patrick Tutembe, and I work for the Electricity Regulatory Authority in the pricing unit as a principal economist. Indeed, there are about two major issues at the center and at the heart of mini-grid regulation, and that is the tariff and also the period within which the investors can be allowed to recoup their investment. One thing that we have to keep our mind on is that even when we are able to compare and benchmark across countries, the social, political, and economic environment within which mini-grids differ across countries. And we see that when it comes to Uganda, with the exception of island areas, you find that the areas that we have suitable for mini grid extension, for mini grid development, where we have a relative certainty of no grid extension within the next 5-10 years, they tend to be in far-flung rural areas with probably few economic centers. And that has a very big implication about the two things we are talking about, the tariff and the concession period. One thing that is very clear in regulation in our context is that any investment has to be recovered. Costs of investment have to be recovered, including cost of operation and the cost of capital. However, for that to happen, it means that we must be having adequate demand from these areas for us to be able to have the developers sell energy that can help them recoup their investment. So the best way we think this investment has to be facilitated, one is that you cannot, whereas we appreciate that the starting point is that people have exorbitant costs of energy, and some of these energy sources are not clean energy. So there is an opportunity for us to develop mini grids. But when you develop mini grid in such an area, one is that we have observed that in some areas, there are people who still get connections, and for some reason, they are not purchasing energy. Probably that is a behavior change issue. But even for those who consume, the energy remains little. Now, when we sat at the table, the question was, is there a mix of subsidies and charges from customers that can actually enable investors to recoup their investment? And it led to a decision of capping the charges from customers at 30 cents. So this also continues to have an implication on the term of the concession, because for us to enable investment climate, if the grid was to arrive before the concession period, it means that the government takes one of the most plausible options is for the government to actually do compensation of the investor. So it means that if you have the target of 300 mini grids per year, and you would want to carry a contingent liability of compensation by government in case the grid arrives, it means that the contingent liability of government also keeps increasing. And the best way to manage it is to ensure that these timelines are close to realistic in terms of when the concession can last, so that if the concession has ended, then there is a revaluation of whether the grid is just at the next door and is going to arrive, or this concession can extend. So that discussion of tariffs and the concession period makes regulation to be necessitates regulation to be very dynamic, because it is a discussion that must involve government, a discussion that must involve private sector, and a discussion that has taken into consideration the socio-economic abilities of the population that we serve. One, to pay a tariff that is higher than the grid, and also for how long these people can pay it. So the interest of those important stakeholders is at the center of regulation, and it is something that keeps the regulator awake in terms of what is the right balance.
What is the right balance? I think it's still the same question in the room. What would be the right balance for the room? But I think we'll get back to the discussion, I think, later on. We'll circle back to you. Now, I would like to hear from GIZ, my colleague Henry. Uganda has explored a couple of delivery models to deploy mini grids. Yeah, we are seeing mostly public-private partnership, PP models being prioritized for the market, with a pilot, a pro-mini-grids pilot that Elizabeth referred to, that we have jointly implemented with government and the regulator, just to test the market and see whether this model would actually open up the market. So Henry, could you share a bit some of the key learnings from these PP models, and particularly they're usually attached to tenders? Yeah, what has been your experience from a regulatory perspective? Do you think these kinds of approaches are able to inform or scale up mini-grid efforts in the market, really open up the market and really scale mini-grid deployment? Or do we need to do something different? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Henry Jumba. I work for GIZ, currently coordinating the Get Transform project here in Uganda. Olga, that is a very nice question. I mean, we've walked this journey for the past 8 years with the ministry and the regulator as GIZ. And I mean, we set out to do the PPP, but we looked at what models could already unlock some of the benefits. And the benefit here is the private capital. Now, we all understand in the room that government resources are constrained. Yeah, they face so many competition for the different priorities in the country. Mini-grids are not an exception because they are part of the broader electrification plans in the country, because you have the grid taking the largest chunk, and then of course the mini-grids come into the picture. But the idea of the PPP, that is the public-private partnership, is to de-risk the enabling environment. And here de-risking means for some of these early stage markets for mini-grids, for example, you have so many risks whereby the developers, not even the developers, the financiers are not willing to invest into this environment. So what a PPP does is, just like Patrick mentioned, balancing the interest. So you have both government and then the private sector playing into the same objective. So on the side of government, perhaps the interest is social equity and ensuring that the energy provided is affordable, but then also there is access. Now, on the private sector side, the interest is how can I recoup my investment? And recouping that investment with making some profit on it as well. So that is the idea of a PPP. But looking back at our journey as GIZ in the implementation of, for example, the Pro-Mini Grids project, again, the idea that you can borrow from a PPP is it offers you exclusivity. Now, exclusivity on the side of the developer, because we know that where most of these mini-grid sites are, either the grid is near or it's going to arrive soon. Now, one of the biggest risks in the mini-grid business is, especially for the developer, is grid arrival. And I know my colleague here, Alex, will speak to it. I mean, if I'm going to install a mini-grid right now, and in the next 2 years, the grid is arriving, that means my business case is no longer viable. I'm out of business. So it offers you exclusivity because government guarantees that you'll be operating a concession for a given period of time as per your license. Then the other benefit is with this framework, you actually have bankable or standardized contracts. I mean, Elizabeth spoke of the lease agreement, the subsidy agreement, the implementation agreement. Outside this, you do not have some of these contracts, the risks. And we all know the risks that are associated with this. Then the third is the technical regulation standards. I mean, ERA has done a great job in this space. Again, with support from Get Transform, we were able to partner with ERA to come up with these technical standards. I know perhaps there will be a mention of it, but the idea is they address these other gaps, such as grid arrival, such as the cost of service. Because if you're to implement mini-grids with the current national standards, the standards are inherently high. And that means that the cost of providing the service, again, that trickles into the tariff, becomes very high. So that means that you need technical standards that are specifically tailored for mini-grids. But then also, in this framework, the PPP, we find some other benefits, such as the physical incentives. I want to share on our journey for the pro-mini grids, where we've found ourselves through the ministry having to support the private developer to clear the components, the mini grid components, because there have been significant delays with customs, for example, clearance at the border. So basically, if you're the private sector doing your own thing, you're going to be stuck, because then you need government to come in. So I think it's a framework that brings in everyone together to see how to address those gaps. But also, the biggest, I think this is the biggest asset of the PPP is the economies of scale. Because, for example, with the banded nature of the GIZ Pro Mini Grids project, and I know Get Access is going to do the same, you find that you have clusters. Now, if you're doing one mini grid project, of course, the cost is going to be very high because you have operations, yeah, besides the capital investment, and then all these running costs. So if you bundle all of them together, then definitely you're going to reduce the costs over there. But also, the other aspect is increasing the attractiveness of the project, because then you increase the financial viability. You have more demand or more consumption on that note. So what do we learn? What we learn is future projects are really going to benefit from this, because as GIZ, again, we've packaged the lessons learned with the ministry. We've identified the gaps. Already Get Access is working on some of those gaps. But we also continue to engage in discussions with the regulator, with the ministry, to see how best to address some of this. Thank you so much, Olga.
Great, thank you so much, Henry. I had a lot of positives. Could you just hint on one challenge with the PP model from your experience?
Well, one of the challenges is it's a multi-stakeholder approach. And it being a multi-stakeholder approach, you have decision-making at different levels. Now, we all know that our frameworks of cooperation or development are not the same. The ministry will have to go through their processes to approve, for example, a stage. Yeah? GIZ will have its own processes of approving. When you go to the developer, they have to do financial close. They will have to tell you that we have this list of requirements that we need and the timelines to that. So one of the things that we are seeing here is one, coordination, but then also the implementation frameworks of the different stakeholders across the board. So that will have to be taken into account. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Henry. And actually, that's a very, very good point, and leads me to our next discussant. Challenges with PB models, really timelines, tenders take so long, yeah? Coordinating and aligning the different stakeholders within the PP arrangements, this really delays the kickoff time for projects, yeah? But of recent in the markets, we are seeing new innovative delivery models coming up in the markets, particularly the result-based financing in markets like Nigeria, Zambia, Mozambique. BGFA is represented here and is one of the key EU member states representing one of the key EU member states, Sweden, that is implementing RBFs in many grids in the market. We wanted to hear what has been your experience with these RBFs. We are hearing a lot of positives from the other markets that RBFs are able to allow for innovation, there is flexibility, then most importantly to underline quicker implementation timelines. Yeah. Compared to the PPP sort of tender sort of approach model. Given your experience with RBF funding windows, also in different countries, including Uganda, I actually have two questions for you. What are the valuable lessons that you've learned in the regulatory setup of those markets that has been able to allow different delivery models to work? And if so, what are some of the regulatory challenges in designing or implementing such a program? When you look at the regulatory setup of the Ugandan market, is the RBF model fitting right, or there are challenges to that and the adaptations that could be made? Yeah, please, Jerome. Introduce yourself, please, first. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeroen van der Linden, or Jerome, for those who find it difficult to pronounce my Dutch name. I'm representing BGV here. Just short recap on BGV. BGV stands for Beyond the Grid Fund for Africa. It's a multi-donor, multi-country program. Started off in 2017 in Zambia, funded by Sweden, and since then has extended to Burkina Faso, DR Congo, Uganda, Mozambique, and Liberia. And the donors in Uganda include Sweden, and in addition to Sweden, Denmark. What we basically do is provide support to the private sector, solar home system providers, mini-grid developers, battery rental companies, productive use companies, in the form of finance. So we provide RBF, results-based financing, to these companies, in addition to technical assistance that these companies might need to develop their distribution strategies or to get access to financing and so on. And in addition to that, we have a separate component which is focusing on providing institutional support to government and related stakeholders in helping them to develop more conducive policy and regulatory frameworks. So basically, we're trying to build the enabling environment in order for these off-grid investments to take off. So we're active in 6 countries, and we've seen different regulatory frameworks being developed in different contexts. And in terms of the lessons learned, I think this might be an open door, but I think the term clarity was coined a few times. Also, Henry talked about one of the biggest risk for mini-grid developer is grid encroachment, grid arrival. We've seen in many countries actually that we are active in is that although there is regulatory instruments in place for mini-grids, they are not providing clarity. I think the regulatory instruments should be seen as an investment guide actually for potential mini-grid developers, and so that means they should be well spelled out, provide full clarity actually what this means actually in the long and the short term for investments for investors. And so there's different aspects to a regulatory instrument which are important for a mini-grid developer, like the licensing, concession period, tariff mechanisms, tariff approval, including grid arrival and grid compensation mechanisms. And what we see in many regulatory frameworks is that grid encroachment is touched upon as a simple clause in a regulatory framework, but it's not well worked out. So, a well worked out regulatory framework in terms of grid encroachment spells out the different options that the mini-grid developer has. Either, when a grid arrives, the mini-grid developer has the option to, abandon the scene and to leave its investment, or it can act as an IPP, feeding back into the grid, and so there's different options available. And then when you have these different options, you need to work these options out. So what are the consequences in terms of the financial implications? What are the compensation mechanisms? How are the assets valued? Actually, if for example, the national utility would take over. And these kind of details, so the devil is actually in the details. They are in many cases not spelled out, and I think that is contributing to providing insecurity to mini-grid developers. We've seen also in some cases that regulatory frameworks are not so much tailored actually to the needs of the country, so not to the contextualized environment in which these investments are taking place. One example is, for example, Liberia, who are now improving, but who have been mainly copying actually the regulatory instruments from the US into the Liberian situation. And in addition to some clauses which are not really detailed, it provides also insecurity to investors in Liberia. I think one thing that I would like to stress is also the fact that one another also depends on the situation of the regulator, the recognition of the regulator in the country. So the regulator is supposed to be the watchdog for the electricity sector. But in many cases, we're seeing that regulatory frameworks and also the regulator is quite new in the country. And we see that in Mozambique, for example, we see that in Liberia as well. So the regulator as such has not earned the recognition by sector players to be the watchdog and to enforce, regulations. And so there is a need actually to capacitate these regulators to provide the right type of support, technical assistance, capacity building, and so on. And I think you guys in Uganda are very lucky to be endowed with, and I must say that the best regulator in Africa, right? Am I right to say that? And so even during our first tender call in 2021, I think the isolated grid standards were not fully developed yet, but despite that, we saw a lot of interest coming in from mini-grid developers and responded to our call for proposals. And that has to do with the fact that the ERA as regulator here is very much capacitated to handle these regulations. And what we see, for example, in countries like Mozambique, there's still, because of the fact that the regulator is new, there's need actually for guiding the regulator in, making sure that they implement the regulation very well. Maybe I should pause here. I have more lessons learned, but I think I would like to pause here and give it back to you, Olga. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Interesting discussion and stressing, of course, the importance of clarity, issues around grid arrival, which are also cutting across, and also the appreciation for the regulator here. That's quite impressive, which means that the market is actually ready for more innovative delivery models from what BGFA has submitted. I would like to get to NEOT, Alex. Alex is quite in a unique position here. He's representing both the private sector, private investor sort of perspective, but also doubles as a project developer in Uganda, representing NEOT of Grid Africa. Yeah, so I feel like I just want to be direct with this question. It's clear that government needs private sector to take lead, and invest in the market. Risks around these projects and why it's important to sort of create an enabling environment for private sector to play have been well presented on this panel. So you, as one of the biggest equity investors in the market right now for mini-grids in Uganda, do you think the level of de-risking is enough? Provided the level of de-risking that is provided under the current regulatory framework is enough to deploy your private capital? Does this really align with your future investment strategy, investing in mini-grids in the different countries that you're investing in? But also if you could share as well your perspective as a project developer, how has the regulatory environment here in Uganda affected your mini-grids work? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga, and my colleagues. Alex Wanume, I'm the country director for NOAA Uganda. Some of you may know it as formerly as Winch. We have currently 31 mini-grids in the country, and with a pipeline of a number of mini-grids that we are working on. And we have been in the country for the past, I think, 7 years, dealing specifically in mini-grids. So we know how it has been before, the progress that has been made, and where we believe the fine-tuning should be made in order to make sure that we can achieve these ambitious targets in terms of mini-grid deployment in the country. Straight to your question, Olga, our feeling as the private sector is that on paper, the regulatory framework is quite good, because we had an input into the regulations that were done, the 2020 regulations. We have had a lot of engagements with the policymakers. However, we feel that when it comes to actual implementation, when it comes to actual mini-grid development implementation, actually, it's a joke amongst us right now that every stakeholder in the mini-grid development process is important, except the mini-grid developer. Because all our lessons that we try to put through sometimes, some are adopted and some are not. And I'm happy to know that, the challenges that the ministry has noted, the ERA has noted, have been what we have been saying for the past couple of years, and right now they've started being taken notice of. One of the biggest challenges we have right now is that it seems that there's lack of trust when it comes to the private sector. We feel that we are seen as, we're trying to make money, charge the rural people in the rural areas high tariffs, and then run away with the money while charging the people high tariffs. So that has led to a situation where, as the private sector, we are handicapped even before we begin the races. We are told on one hand that, this is the tariff that has been capped at this is what we are going to offer you. And on the other side, we have been told that the concession period is this, take it or leave it. And there's no room for very, very little room for negotiations. Of course, we've been able to have some middle ground. I'm happy to see that in some of the projects, especially that we have been licensed, we've been able to get a few concessions here and there. But then, speaking of the grand scale, that if the target of 2,000 mini-grids by 2030 is to be made, there have to be a lot of adjustments, which I'm happy that are being taken note of. And then when, right now we have been in operations for the past 4-5 years, and we have noticed that one of the biggest challenges that comes to when it comes to mini-grids is the operational phase. The construction phase is easy. That one, anyone can do the construction, do the commissioning and the launching. Everyone, clinks the champagne glasses and everything is done. But look at these projects 3 years, 4 years down the line. When you come back, you're finding white elephants. Why? Because the right people have not been selected to do the operations. The blood for a developer is different from the blood of, let's say, a contractor. Because for us, we are there for the long haul. And that's why we are asking for, and one of the points you have to look at is the concession periods that we are asking for. We're asking for 20 years because we are here to be there for the for the long haul. One of the challenges that was mentioned was the demand risks. As a developer, we're able to navigate some of these challenges when it comes to mini grids. And it cuts both ways. There's the low demand, and then there's when the demand exceeds the capacity. So what do you do next? Imagine you have 10 years, and then in those 10 years, let's say you reach year 5, year 6, and you have low demand in the 6th year. You have not been able to make your returns on investments. What do you do then? As a developer, 10 years, you can't do anything. But also goes to the other side that if you reach, let's say, year 5, year 6, and then the demand has exceeded the installed capacity, and now you need to have a fresh reinvestment. With 10 years, these are challenges that we are able to overcome. In fact, one of the projects where we have been licensed for 20 years, we are now planning an upscale. After 3 years of operation, we are now going to double the capacity because we know we have 20 years. It's very clear to see where you're going to go within the 20 years and able to do the reinvestments. So what we would ask for, and of course a lot of progress has been made, is a common ground, that we come on a common ground. Like Henry mentioned that when it comes to the PPP, there are so many stakeholders. So let's have this middle ground and understanding so that we are able to come to a conclusion and make sure that we can achieve these targets. Long answer to your question. I know it was a yes or no question, but there's a lot of background to this. It's not really white or black. Sometimes there's that gray point that I wanted to also put across. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing quite your experience. So very, very insightful discussion. Thank you so much, panelists. I would like to invite the audience, if there are any burning questions to what the panel has just presented. The regulator is looking for the right balance as well. And the PP model is, of course, more alignment. It zeroes down to finding the right balance in all angles. Yeah, so to our audience, are there any burning questions? This will be the time.
Thank you for the discussion. How has the advancement of technology, specifically in the RE space, and reduction in prices, played a role in bringing down the costs of mini grids. That's one. The second one, for the developers, to what extent have you considered having hybrid systems, not only limited between, say, solar and wind, but other technologies that are speaking to resources within the communities? For example, if a community has potential, say, biogas, how are these systems being integrated from a design perspective to bring down the cost, improve the reliability of the system? Those are the ones I wanted to hear from the panelists, how they are juggling these advancement in technology to bring down the cost. Because what I see, the tendency seems to be to go for the easy, not necessarily easier, but the easier systems of solar and battery, and maybe a bit of DG. But I'm just trying to challenge the developers that they need to look outside that space to try and bring down the costs. Thank you.
Quite interesting question. I feel like it's directed to Alex, but you can choose among yourself who wants to take it. No, it was very direct. Yeah, Alex, please.
I'll take this. They already whispered to me that this is my question. These are my questions, yeah. Yes, in regards to your first question about how the achievement in advancement of technology has led to a reduction of prices, yes, this is a very good observation, because I can tell you that the price at which we installed our 25 mini grids, that was 3-4 years back. I think right now we can almost double the capacity at which we are installing the mini grids. And actually, the newer projects that we have, that we are doing right now, we have been able to leverage on this and increase the capacities on some of the projects that we are going to install. And if we are to use the same prices and we go back 3-4 years when we are purchasing the prices, right now even the tariff would be able to get a lower tariff. And this, I think, plays into the question when it comes to the concession periods, because there's that worry about that for 20 years we are going to charge this 29-cent tariff, 30 cents tariff. But even on our side as developers, charging a high tariff is not necessarily in our best interest, because there's always the demand risk. So we'd rather charge a lower tariff and make sure, and we know that we are making the sales that we can. So if we are to do a reinvestment, let's say because the batteries that we installed were lead acid at the time, we are looking at maybe 10 years, best case scenario, best case, if you're not having any issues, but the lead acid, we are going to look at 8 years to reinvest. If you have to do the reinvestment, when you have a 20-year concession period and we do a reinvestment at, let's say, the 10-year mark, we are able to even reduce the tariff even further. And I think this allays some of the fears that have been had, that you're going to charge 30 cents for 20 years. No, these are some of the mechanisms that even I think the license that we had, there's a mechanism, I think, after 5 years to discuss and see what can be done around this. So this is how this advancement in technology has played a role, or can play a role, given we are all aligned in this aspect. The next one is, to what extent have we considered the mix in renewable technology? For our mini grids, we haven't really looked, we haven't yet explored this, but it's something that we are really open to exploring. The solar advancements have been more pronounced compared to the biomass in our side, but obviously we have not been looking into that. Thank you.
I just want to add, I thank you for bringing up the example of Mandalis. I think we want to encourage developers to have that innovation. They already have the hybrid. They didn't actually seek a subsidy from government. They used carbon credits. They sell byproducts from the biomass gasification, and they even reached grid parity. So that's a good example that you've given of the hybrid. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have another question over there. But again, with hybrids, that's also an extensive discussion on how sustainable some of these other alternative technologies would look like in terms of biomass. But also picking up the point of government tenders need to allow developers the flexibility to decide which kind of technology would be deployable in certain service territories or locations. Thank you. That's a good point.
This morning. Yes, morning. Mine strictly goes to Alex. I've been one of the beneficiaries for wind energy project in Lamore. So from point of view is that there are two perspectives that I can speak it out. One, the capacity of the project. Like for instance, in some point, you will have 40 megawatts for energy point, and others will be having 80. So when they bring in the appliance, like more especially this maize miller and other, the competition will not work it out. Simply because you will have a household of more than 200 people that consume around 20% of the phase or the project site. So the remaining with those one with operating machine like a welding machine, maize miller and all those, it affects people really. Simply because if we are enhancing more production, I do request that through Alex, raise it out that all the 25 mini grid station in Lamore are partly to be upgraded. Let it from 40 to 80, so that this maize miller and those redundant machinery that were taken that side can be put into work. Then the second one is about the technicality of the project. Ideally, from the ground phase here can be well and good, but we see some loophole with the technical people on the ground, more especially in connecting, and the rural people are not all that sensitized on the bad part of electricity, because this one is electricity, even if it's mini grids. So those are my point. I need to put it down. I'm one of the beneficiaries from Lamore. Thank you.
Did I say something?
There was also a second question. Maybe we take the two and then we answer in the interest of time. There was another question over there.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your presentations. Thank you. My name is Mukoza John. I am from the private sector. My question is related to financial sourcing. And I don't want to have the impression that mini grids are financed by only grants. But if not so, has anybody had an experience dealing with commercial banks vis-a-vis our financial landscaping in Uganda? Thank you very much.
We are taking more and then we answer one.
Yeah, thank you. Center of Excellence for Renewable Energy and Efficiency, which is a regional body mandated by the East African Community to promote renewable energy and energy efficiency. Yeah, from the panel, I heard one of the panelists sharing their experience they experienced from 6 countries, and they mentioned that these 6 countries, all of them are doing different things. Yeah, I wanted to bring this question up, especially to Henry Jumba and the panelists who mentioned about the experience from the 6 countries.